Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today we are diving into a really fascinating thought experiment. We're going to examine the invisible mechanics of ensemble storytelling, and we're doing it by looking at one of the absolute biggest sitcoms of all time. But we aren't just looking at what made it tick. No, we're going to look at what would happen if you just yanked out a single crucial load-bearing pillar. So let's get right into it. We're exploring how the rhythm of 6 unique personalities fundamentally breaks down when you remove just one specific piece of the puzzle.
Okay, so what if Chandler Bing just completely disappeared after season 1? I want you to literally drop yourself straight into that alternate timeline for a second. You can't even imagine this show without all 6 of them, right? It's a sitcom about 6 friends in New York. We're not talking about removing Ross or Rachel and completely gutting the central romance. We're not talking about losing Monica's iconic apartment. We are talking about losing Chandler, the sarcastic, awkward, joke-cracking glue of the whole group, just written out early. Now, at first glance, maybe that sounds like a small change. The coffee still brews at Central Perk, the laughs still happen, life in Manhattan keeps moving. But as we're gonna see, the very second he vanishes, something incredibly subtle just breaks.
Let's set the stage for our point of divergence. In this alternate timeline, season 1 ends exactly how we all remember it. Ross is still railing from his divorce. Rachel is still figuring out how to do her laundry and live independently. Monica's chasing perfection. Joey's hunting for auditions. And Phoebe is, well, she's Phoebe. But then season 2 rolls around, and Chandler is just gone. Suddenly, the coffee shop is missing its background commentary. There are absolutely no awkward one-liners floating over from that big armchair. No sarcastic interruptions to cut through the tension when things get heavy.
Now think about what that famous catchphrase actually represents. In those early days, Chandler isn't the loudest guy in the room. He's really not driving the massive dramatic plot lines either. He is the commentary in the background. He's the guy who reacts, rather than the one pushing the scene forward. But that quiet, reactive presence, those constant, could I be any more jokes, they were quietly shaping the entire rhythm of the group. And honestly, that is exactly why losing him completely rewrites the DNA of the whole show.
Let's play out how this builds. When the writers inevitably panic and try to adjust to the silence in this alternate reality, here's what happens. Step 1. Joey gets a bunch of extra comedic beats. But without Chandler there to bounce off of, they kind of fall flat. Step 2. Ross becomes way more socially awkward just trying to fill that dead air. And step 3. Even Phoebe's randomness gets stretched way too thin to cover the extra space. But the thing is, all these wild overcorrections completely fail to replace what was actually lost. Because they're desperately trying to replace jokes when what they actually lost was balance. See, Chandler was never, ever just the funny one. He was the group's pressure valve, basically a person who releases built-up tension to maintain equilibrium and balance within a group. That was his actual structural role in the narrative. He was the absolute essential grounding mechanism for everyone else. When the emotional temperature of the room got a little too hot, he was the mechanism that cooled everything down, so the sitcom didn't suddenly morph into a heavy melodrama.
Let's look at how this balancing act worked in real time. When Ross got way too intense about his life falling apart, Chandler softened the scene. When Monica got way too controlling or neurotic, Chandler's humor stepped in and made her feel human and relatable. When Joey's simplicity leaned a bit too far into total exaggeration, Chandler grounded it right back in reality. Without this invisible balancing act, think about what actually happens to the show. Every single emotion becomes louder, every argument among the friends drags on longer, and every silence feels much heavier.
Section 1. The character casualties.
Because the reality is, when you remove that pressure valve, the other characters start to warp. Take the original Monica. Her iconic, slow-burn romance with Chandler works so perfectly because it grows really slowly. It's hidden beneath jokes, deep friendship, and shared vulnerability. His emotional walls actually make his eventual openness incredibly powerful. But without Chandler, her alternate romantic arc totally shifts. She still dates, she still searches, but she completely lacks that gradual emotional mirror to reflect her own growth. That beloved slow-burn relationship literally never exists. And honestly, losing that emotional mirror completely changes the heartbeat of the show.
Now let's map out the really devastating consequences for the rest of the crew. Without Chandler as a confidant, Ross becomes completely isolated in his grief. He takes himself and his dinosaur lectures way too seriously because nobody is there to lovingly mock him. His whole arc becomes heavy and dramatically unbalanced. Joey, meanwhile, seriously risks becoming entirely one-dimensional. The charm is absolutely there, but sitcom comedy relies entirely on real-time reactions. Without someone to translate him or react to his crazy ideas, Joey loses his timing. And then there's Phoebe. Her unpredictability just becomes too central. Phoebe works best when she's contrasted with grounded characters, you know? Without Chandler, that contrast weakens, and too much unpredictability just totally overwhelms the sitcom structure.
Eventually, Monica just collapses under the burden of it all. Even the most highly structured personality in the whole group begins to feel completely uneven when she's forced to carry both the emotional and the comedic weight of the show without her counterbalance. The puzzle pieces just do not fit together the same way anymore.
Moving on to Section 2, the missing rhythm.
Let's step out from the story itself for a minute here. When a key cast member just vanishes from an ensemble, you're dealing with massive technical and structural losses. The chemistry becomes incredibly uneven. It's exactly like a band missing its bass line. Just imagine Central Park without him. The remaining core cast is still really strong, the writing is still sharp, the premise is highly relatable, but the booth just feels quieter. Conversations stretch out entirely too long. The punchlines don't land with the same pop. You can still hear the song, but something fundamental is gone. That driving bass line is just missing.
Think about the invisible mechanics of comedy for a second. Timing, pauses, interruptions, overlapping dialogue. Chandler was an absolute master of reaction, and he held all these technical elements together. Remove him, and suddenly the editing room has an absolute nightmare on its hands. The writing has to shift dangerously. Even the studio audience response changes, because the built-in pauses for laughter no longer have that perfect sarcastic button at the end of them. These are the exact invisible mechanics that turn a show into a cultural phenomenon rather than just another TV program.
Section 3, the hidden truth.
So, what does this all build up to? The absolute deepest loss in this alternate timeline is something called emotional safety. Basically, this is the permission given to an audience to laugh during uncomfortable, insecure, or highly vulnerable moments. Chandler gave us that permission. His vulnerability, which was always disguised as humor, is exactly what made the show's most awkward moments feel universally human. He showed us that insecurity could actually be funny.
A show without that safety, well, it becomes way more serious. It becomes less forgiving. It honestly becomes less human in its humor. Without Chandler proving, week after week, that even the most awkward, self-sabotaging people can be deeply loved and accepted by their friends, the sitcom completely loses its cultural magic and its forgiving warmth.
Which brings us to a really crucial truth. Sometimes the most important person in a story isn't the one standing directly in the spotlight. It isn't the one with the biggest, loudest, dramatic arc. It's the one keeping everything else in perfect rhythm. Even in a show packed with unforgettable characters, Chandler was never just one of the six. He was the reason the six worked at all. Without him, the world of the show doesn't just change, it completely loses its rhythm. So, focus learners, I'm going to leave you with this provocative final thought. Which key character would change your favorite show entirely? It really makes you realize that sometimes changing just one single piece changes the whole shebang. There is always another what if hiding right there inside the invisible mechanics of your favorite stories, just waiting to be uncovered. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep an eye out for those hidden rhythms in the media you love. Catch you next time.